Good morning, everybody. As I mentioned before, my name is Federico Peña. I'm the founder and president of IT-ROI Solutions. I am going to be your featured speaker today. Today's webinar topic is going to be how to ensure PPM data accuracy for executive reports. And we're going to discuss a lot of different options on this particular topic, anywhere from definition on how we can actually help to fix those data accuracy issues. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. There is a question and answers box, so from within side of your GoToWebinar docking station, please note that there is a questions box. We will be asking quite a few questions throughout the webinar that we would like end users to be able to fill in answers to, and the main reason for that is so we can tailor the particular webinar towards the audience. So what are the main needs that people are experiencing with data accuracy issues, specifically around PPM? So where is it that we can help? And those are going to be key questions that we're going to use to be able to manage the content of this particular webinar. I'm going to start off with a little bit about IT-ROI Solutions. We started off as a consulting firm in 2009. After about a couple of years of doing repetitive consulting work, we noticed that there was a major need to build tools around facilitating PPM. So what we tried to do is we try to make PPM simpler. So we built integration tools anywhere from enterprise tool sets all the way to end user tools such as Excel or SharePoint. One of the main needs that we try to accomplish is how to get end users to interact more with your PPM tool. And that's the main purpose of our particular tool sets. The webinar topics that we're going to be talking about today are, the overview. Who suffers from data inaccuracy? And then we're going to talk a little bit about why data inaccuracy is important, or accuracy is important. What are the effects of poor data quality? What are the common culprits of bad data? And then we're going to get into possible solutions or ideas on how you can resolve your data accuracy problems. And then we're going to have a question and answer session. Multinational survey by Experience revealed that 95% of companies suffer from common data errors, including incomplete, outdated, or inaccurate data. So it's important to understand that bad data isn't just a series of micro-level flaws. As the errors multiply up the hierarchy, the damage grows, right? So as IT organizations, we live and breathe data. We all want to believe that the data that we use is accurate, but I think we can all readily admit that it might not be as accurate as we would like. It seems like data discrepancies are now just part of our lives, right? So inaccurate data does two things, right? It causes doubts in the results. It causes an aversion for people that rely on it and to do our jobs. So most companies out there right now are accepting, a 10% discrepancy in data. So really when you ask somebody, how accurate do you think your data is? And they say, oh, we think it's completely accurate. Really what they're saying is it's 90% accurate in best case scenario. So in other words, if two separate systems track the same data, they're within 10% of each other. Right? And that's considered in, let's say, in the big data field, data that's accurate enough. Right? Unfortunately, we aren't always able to even get to, a 10%. So as a matter of fact, I would say that if a 10% error margin is considered 100%, most of the people on this call would say that their data is probably 70 to 80% accurate. Right? So the question is, where does data become inaccurate, right? And I think most people will agree that, data becomes inaccurate in most cases in initial data entry, right? We're going to talk a little bit about stale data, which is another location where data becomes inaccurate, right? But accuracy isn't purely just typing it correctly or incorrectly, right? It must have the right value and represent a value in a consistent form, with other representations of the same value, right? So the first question I want to ask people on this call, right, and I would like, if people can actually answer this inside of the question box is, right, How accurate do you think your PPM data is? You think, are you in the 50%, 60%, 70, 80, 90? So as I mentioned before, if you guys can spend a couple of seconds and just type in a number on the question and answer, that would be fantastic. Right? And that's going to really help us gear the presentation towards, where most of the audience is going to. Why is data accuracy important? Right? So the first thing I want to do is, I want to say, what exactly is data quality, right? Before you begin to get a handle on data itself, it's important to understand what data is, right? So according to Gartner, right, data quality is examined by several points, including existence, right? Does the organization have data to begin with, right? The validity of the data, right? Are the values acceptable? Consistency of the data. When the same piece of data is stored in different locations, do they have the same values, right? Integrity, right? How accurate the relationship between data elements and data sets are. Accuracy, whether the data accurately describes the properties of the objects, right? And relevance, so that's another key one, right? Whether or not the data is appropriate to support the objective. Obviously, all of those things it's a lot of information to try and clean up by hand, right? Of course, cost savings are one thing, but oftentimes management and other executives don't just want savings, right? They want to see direct correlation in terms of revenue. So the real question is, how much can clean data make for us? In addition to revenues and savings, the benefits of clean data go much farther, right? With greater data reliability comes greater credibility and a stronger decision-making foundation backed by data, right? Reports become more accurate, customers respond more to accurate personalizations, and all departments enjoy greater productivity and efficiency. So it's one of those cycles of wins, right? I'm going to stop here for a second. I got quite a few responses. I got anywhere from 35% to 90%. Some of them are saying guess. They say some areas are 90, but many are 40 to 50. Some, I can't believe that somebody has 35%. We're going to have to figure out what their particular issue is, and maybe we can cover that in questions farther down the road. So all I'm saying is, most of the people here, there's only one organization here that says that they could possibly be around 90%. The rest are more in the 60 to 70 range. Out of 15 people that answered, one is at 90%, minus, let's say, the 10% that they're already inside of an acceptable accuracy level. So that's actually pretty low, And we're gonna get a little bit into the cost of inaccurate data in a second. I just kind of wanted to share that information with you guys. Going back to this particular slide, good data is, like I said, a cycle of wins, right? So as you can see, few inaccurate records or non-standardized entries don't seem like a big problem, right? But as your business scales, more and more information becomes fragmented, fraught with issues, right? Cost escalates, efficiency plummets, right? But the same token, by spending a little now, right, you reap far greater benefits over time. And any campaign started or improved based on solid, reliable information is one that you can look onto time again for greater insights and metrics, right? I'm going to go by, IBM actually did an estimate on how much bad data actually costs. The estimate for 2016 was $3.1 trillion, right? Obviously, we're not necessarily related strictly to PPM. I would say, there's a lot of other tool sets. Most of it is around marketing, where those costs are, right? But a lot of it has to be with record and data entry, okay? And, the reason bad data costs so much is that decision makers, managers, knowledge workers, data scientists, and others have to accumulate it in their everyday work. And doing so is both time-consuming and expensive, right? The data that they need has plenty of errors, and in the face of critical deadline, many individuals simply make corrections themselves to complete the task at hand, right? And this is something that I want to emphasize because I'm sure a lot of you as project managers actually do this, right? Which is correct the data as you need for a particular meeting or for a particular executive call, right? I'm going to take a second here to get the audience to really think about how inaccurate their data is by asking the following question. How many of you go into your PPM tool to get a report or export data into Excel, right? And take that data, you massage it in Excel, maybe with a couple of formulas, some pivot tables, and then you export a couple of graphs into PowerPoint so you can show your management the data that they really need for a particular meeting, right? So as opposed to getting the report directly from your PPM tool, how many actually of you massage your data prior to a meeting? A simple yes, no would be fantastic. Once again, if you guys can put that in to the question and answer, that would be awesome. But really, that's not really where the big expense comes, right? The big expense comes from making decisions based on data that's incorrect, right? Or corrected in flight by the incorrect person. Let's provide an example of this cost, right? Let's put this into reality as it pertains to the PPM world, right? As I asked above, we discussed, a scenario regarding massaging data, right? So here I get yes, yes, always, absolutely, always. Some direct, some indirect, but always. Extract and massage. I have one person that says no. Extract, small adjustments for small number of reports. Others not. So I would say that in general, just about everyone says yes, right? So let's back up a second and figure out why this needs to be done, right? Why do you find it important to take time to recompile the data into something that does not come from the system of truth, right? And I think the answer is because you know that the data is inaccurate, right? You as the end user, the person that enters the data knows it's inaccurate, and you know that if you take that data to management, they're going to make decisions based on false expectations. So if you're doing this at your organization, then you're already aware of the myriad of reasons why data accuracy is important, right? If you're already massaging your data so you can present it to management, then you know the reasons why data accuracy is important. So let's talk a little bit about what are the effects of poor data quality, right? There's lots of different effects. Here I'm gonna just talk a little bit about poor customer satisfaction, right? As you guys know, happy customers are loyal customers, and I'm not necessarily talking about customers that spend money with your organization. Your business could be a customer as well, right? And the best way to keep them happy is to consistently and efficiently provide high quality personalized service, right? Given the number of sources of customer information available to companies in the current market, right, the need to manage this information effectively is more critical than ever. Right? So poor data collection and management is a recipe for disaster when you consider, the potential impact of using bad data. Right? So, I'm going to go back and say, researches that have been done, they suggest that, bad data and customer communications can negatively impact the revenue by as much as 25%. And I'm sure you guys are aware of that, with inside of the PPM tools. Providing an inaccurate view of PPM financials or allocations or assignments or availability to your executives can provide an extremely expensive down approach towards allowing them to make accurate decisions, right? So, and like I said, of course, when we discuss customers, the particular customer could be the business or management, right? So if we talk about the business, well, there are multiple reasons why they receive poor customer service, right? So let's stop for a second and say the business utilizes the PPM tool in your organization needs, right, to plan resource assignments. And your particular assignments are skewed or flawed, and you're stating that, within inside of another global component of your organization, you're looking for X number of new sales reps. While, as a matter of fact, the main issue is one of the project managers forgot to remove those assignments from projects that were closed, right? So now it's providing a negative financial impact to your organization, to your clients, right, as PPM users. Skewed business intelligence, right? As you guys, as we talked about, right, bad data will cause inaccurate forecasting and reporting, right, which means, faulty intelligence. According to Gartner, businesses have seen 40% of their initiatives fail to achieve targeted benefits due to poor data quality. Why is that? Specifically because they can't make an accurate decision, right? For an organization to fail on such high percentages of programs has a significant effect on operational efficiency. So really the investment that you guys are making on your PPM tool is extremely negatively impacted by the quality of the data that you're inputting into it, right? So the number one problem caused by low quality data is the risk you take when using that data to make important business decisions. So if your data is full of errors, that means any data analysis that you run could be completely and utterly wrong. For example, if you don't update your cost plans regularly because it's too time consuming, then the probability that the data is outdated and flawed due to changes in scope across your projects, right? This might not be a big deal to the end user, which is the project manager, the people that are on this call, right? But who updates the data because they're aware for the necessary changes that they need to make. That's why you guys are extracting the data, massaging it in Excel, and then presenting it, right? Because updating it with inside of your PPM tool set might be too time consuming. And it's, like I said, it's all right if you had one project, but I don't know very many project managers that only manage one project and only have one cost plan to update, right? It isn't, the big deal becomes when you have 30 or 40 or 50 or 10 or 20, right? I know some organizations where project managers, believe it or not, have up to like 800 projects each. But that doesn't, I think that we're going to leave that to a different type of discussion. But that's really going to cause, the problem really lies when executives want to make decisions at the program or portfolio level, right? And all of the numbers will be off. That's going to cause them to get a false financial impression on their investments, right? I'm going to come back to the resource utilization and allocation, right? Having the correct resources in the correct locations at the correct time, working at the correct project is important, right? The adverse detrimental can give competition the advantage, right? A business example would be a decision to temporarily relocate inside sales reps, assisting in a territory that accomplished its sales goals already early. Right? So these are, some of the main effects to the business for poor data quality, right? Another one is time and money, wasted time and money, right? With a quarter of the information believed to be inaccurate in U.S. organizations, right? Companies are facing many consequences. First, inaccurate data is affecting the company bottom line. So 77% of companies believe their bottom line is affected by inaccurate and incomplete data. And on average, respondents believe 12% of revenue is wasted. Those are pretty big numbers, right? If you think 12% of your revenue is wasted on inaccurate data, that's a huge cost, right? Now, despite increased knowledge about data quality and the benefits of utilizing data-driven techniques, the average percentage of wasted revenue has not changed in that survey since 2007. So really, since they started tracking it, right? So, a lot of the causes, right, are, what causes it, right? A flawed data entry process, right? A person completes a form on, on a piece of paper or on a computer, right? But really the form design has a lot to do with the amount of inaccurate data that ends up in the database, right? There's also deliberate errors, right? And when I say deliberate errors, right, there's those that occur when the person enters a wrong value on purpose, right? And, what you say, well, why would anyone enter the wrong value on purpose, right? So there's a lot of reasons, right? But the main ones are they probably don't know the correct information. So you have a form that forces you to enter data in a particular field. You don't know the answer. When in doubt, pick C, I guess. You don't want to know, they don't really want to know, or they don't care what the correct information is, right? Or they don't get any benefit from entering right or wrong information, right? or simply, they don't know the correct information. Right? Not knowing the correct information occurs in the form, like I said, when it requires a particular field to be used, the end user doesn't know, right? The person doesn't believe the value is important to the transaction. Those are other common issues, right? So, what are the common culprits? During my whole research on data accuracy for this webinar, there is lack of technology, but mainly it's either it's too time-consuming, tedious, right? Right? Because that just means that if not relevant technology or lack of relevant data, right? So maintaining high-quality, accurate data is a challenge, right, that requires continuous attention, right? I'm going to give an example. It's like fruit in a bowl, right? Data will quickly go bad if it's neglected and not refreshed. I'm going to say, cost plans and allocations in the PPM world is a perfect example of this, right? How often do your project plans change? Right? And not only how often do your project plans change, how often do you update them inside of your PPM tool, right? You might know that they've changed, and you might keep track of it in an Excel or in your MSP or Open Workbench or whatever the tool may be, right? But how often do you actually synchronize that with your system of truth, right? Still, while data, is becoming obsolete, it's still a significant problem, right? There's something or someone who should take some blame, right? And it's usually humans. These are the people doing the equivalent of putting half-eaten bananas or too many pineapples and even cucumbers into your fruit bowl, right? You're just overloading or overwhelming what can actually be feasibly dealt with, right? Employees and customers are bigger culprits for bad data, right? More so than conversions or migrations or integrations or, automated batch processing and, whatever database consolidations. On average, for multiple surveys, attribute 59% of all data quality issues to be human error, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can consider your data to be inaccurate, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about data that's more on static form. So for example, a value, inaccurate data where a value can be correct without being accurate. Now you're probably thinking, what is this guy talking about? Let me give you an example. Let's think of the state, California, and the city named Boston. Right? They're both correct. They both exist. But when used together, such as Boston, California, then one of the two is incorrect, right? So they're inaccuracy, right? The accuracy of the pending values programmatically usually is pretty difficult to enforce, right? So in general, the business tries to blame IT for this, right? But really, it's more of a human error, right? The other one is inconsistency. The first question on any analytic project, for example, would be, where can I get the data? Right? Now, I would like to ask another question here, is how many of the people that are on this particular call utilize more than one PPM tool? So let's say, some of them you are using HP PPM, some CA PPM, some ServiceNow, I don't know, some Primavera. So how many of you utilize different tools for different components of different projects, right? And the other one is, non-integrated data, right? So most organizations store data redundantly, but inconsistently across many systems, right? That were never really designed with integrations in mind, right? Primary keys probably don't match. In most cases, not even unique, or some don't even exist. All right. Now we are going to get into the solutions. First, I want to see if anyone has any questions. I know I went on for a pretty long ramble there, but I would like to see if anyone has any questions regarding data accuracy that they would like me to clear up. So here I've got, I'd say 50% use only one system. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 that utilize PPM and SharePoint. And there's a few that utilize a few other systems as well. All right. So, you know, what are the solutions? Like I said, if we know that 59% of data is caused by human error, well, what we need to do is we need to fix the human error, right? I always say, you know, as we guys saw on the second slide, the main function of our organization is to make PPM simpler. So, you know, I always tell people, well, the solution is make data entry easy, right? So I'm gonna start off actually by saying what are not the answers, okay, to fixing data accuracy, right? So spreadsheets and manual processes are not the answer, right? Now, when I used to go on site consulting back in the day, I used to be a CAPPM consultant, and before that I used to do service desk, and I used to do as well as a product called Harvest by CA, which is a software configuration management product. I couldn't believe the percentage of large organizations that used, you know, manually, what I call manually marked up paper-based organizational charts, right? Spreadsheets, access databases, custom queries and reports, right? You know, I would probably say, I always thought that Access was a thing of the past. Well, you wouldn't believe Access because it's easy. People still like to use it, right? So manual reconciliation, which I see that most of you actually do as well, right? And email-based communication, right? You're probably sitting on your chair nodding your head saying, that's exactly what we do. If so, you already know these processes are slow, error-prone, and highly resource-intensive, right? Especially considering the recurring nature. Worse is they're far too risky at the, you know, in a world where we're requiring airtight compliance, right? Unfortunately, this is the norm. And then you ask why? Why do people do that? Simple, because it's easy, right? Everyone loves Outlook, everyone loves Excel, everyone loves SharePoint, right? It's the status quo, right? Email, like Outlook, is probably your everyday go-to software. I would say that everyone, or you know, I would say 95% of the people that are on this call have their email open more than 80% of their working day, right? So what does that mean? They're familiar with it, right? You know, Excel and Word are probably their second go-to software, right? You know, and if it were up to you guys, if you could do everything inside of those tools, that's all you would ever use, right? So I'm going to talk about different options of why people enter data incorrectly, right? Obviously, there's clear winners, which are, you know, some people that just don't really care, right? A great example of this is when people enter timesheets. And why? It's, you know, generally people don't understand the implications of time entry, and they see it as burdensome, time-consuming, and totally unproductive. You know, and I have to admit, I'm guilty of this, as I usually see entering time as a chore and not something that provides value to an organization. Now that I've switched roles and I'm more in a management role, I can see the importance of entering time because it provides a clear historical view on what things have costed the organization. So let's figure out how to fix, I'm gonna start off by fixing a particular timesheet issue, right? So I know a lot of you, you know, by the answers of particular people that are saying that they utilize more than one system, you know, we want to make sure that we don't overburden people to enter time on too many tasks. And what do I mean by this, right? I think you've all seen, you go and try and populate your timesheet and you have, you know, 30 sheets, 30 pages of tasks, right, that you use, right? But you're going to get much more accurate results. And when I say accurate, I mean useful to your organization. Nobody really cares if you work 15 minutes on task A, 15 minutes on task B, 15 minutes on task C, 15 minutes on task D, right? And they're all really related to the same component of a particular project, right? Sometimes people care about that if they are in the service management industry, for example, right? So you want to know how long it takes to plug in a printer, right? But in general, in project management, it's not that big of a deal, right? The other thing is, you know, make time entry easy. Don't force people to enter time in different systems, right? Try either to integrate the two systems or provide a way for people to utilize this in just one screen. I'm going to show a couple of different options shortly that will show you how you can enter time inside of SharePoint for both CA, PPM, and ServiceNow in one screen, right? So the particular scenario that I'm going to display is why force people to enter 10 different places when they can enter their data in one screen. And I'm going to do a little bit of timesheet management and maybe some risks and issues that not only display in one system, but feed back to their accurate system, right? And the other is to provide feedback to the team on the importance of historical data, right? So the first thing is do not overburden is number one. Then the number two, make it easy. And the number three is train them. Okay? So I'm actually gonna open up a browser here, and I'm gonna bring a browser. Now I'm gonna ask a question, another question. Out of the people that are on this call, does anyone use ServiceNow for project management or ITSM? So any service management. I see a lot of people have answered CA PPM, so I might get into CA PPM first, and then I'm going to cover ServiceNow if anybody else has it. All right. So common problems around the most common problems around data entry in PPM tool sets. Okay. I'm going to see two particular cases within side of the project. All right. Team details. So allocations are huge, right? These are a huge problem, right? When you allocate by period. Okay. Why? Because if you want to edit this data, in this particular case, how many resources do I have? I have 26 resources, and I probably have 12 periods. So a one-year project for 12 periods. And I need to update all of these particular values within inside of here. As you can see, right, this is a very time-consuming task, right? But you know, I know that none of you use ServiceNow, or none of you have answered that you use ServiceNow for allocations, but I'm going to show you the interface from ServiceNow. And the reason I'm going to show you the interface for ServiceNow for data entry is I'm going to show you different scenarios of why it's the same. It doesn't matter what tool it is that you have. Okay, so I'm going to go into my projects. So like everything else, right, you have your project link. And then you have your location for your resources. So now we can, and with inside of the resource plan, we can view the resource availability, right? And with inside of here, we can manipulate the allocation. So, you know, they all contain a very similar view that becomes very difficult for you to manage, right? In this particular case, we're displaying a weekly view by resource, right? You know, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna say, let's make this simple, okay? And although I said, you know, Excel wasn't the solution for end users to use, what if I said, you know, we could have an Excel that actually communicates back and forth, right? So all we're doing is we're providing the end user the ability to utilize a tool that they're familiar with. So in this case here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get allocation data. So now what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the allocation data for this particular project. I'm displaying it in Excel. So I let people work with the data that they're familiar with, right? Make manipulation of this data super easy, right? And load it back into Clarity, all right? So in this particular case, what have we done? We've made and we've simplified the connectivity into your PPM tool, right? And generally, it's because all PPM tools are complex, right? We saw here, you know, when we did an example of ServiceNow, ServiceNow for project management is just as complex or more complex than your CAPPM tool, right? Now let's talk about time entry. Time entry is a common one. So here I see in tools that people utilize, right? I see some that say CAPPM, JIRA, and others. I see one that says CAPPM only, CAPPM. I see one that says CAPPM and SharePoint. I'm actually going to cover the CAPPM and SharePoint here for a second. All right. So in this particular case, I'm going to display how we can actually make CAPPM and SharePoint work together. I see another one that just came in that says CAPPM, SharePoint, Excel, and MS Project. All right, and that's a perfect example of everything that I'm going to demo in this particular case. So what I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to try and display how you should be able to utilize or control everything from one particular view. All right. So in this particular case, you saw that I clicked on this particular link. All right. So what does this do? This opens up a SharePoint site. If that particular SharePoint site did not exist, it would actually create it, come back to CAPPM, grab your team members, and give them access to that. I'm also going to show you a way that we can embed SharePoint inside of here. And I'm going to just change this view here. So in this case now, let's say I wanted to do, you know, I'm going to start off by doing my whole project. I'm going to do document management. So I can literally now grab my documents, drag and drop them. I'm inside of CAPPM, but really I'm doing all of this stuff inside of SharePoint. So if I come back into my SharePoint, my document is going to show up here, right? Oh, let me refresh again. I guess it hasn't completed uploading yet. No document. Oh, it's still uploading here. Give it a second. The other thing as well is from within inside of SharePoint, I can visualize data that comes from my CAPPM, right? In this case, I have data that comes in from CAPPM. So this is my standard CAPPM data that comes here. And then under risks, issues, and change requests, for example, I have the risks and issues. The issues are coming from within inside of ServiceNow. Okay? Risks are coming from PPM, but you can say, well, you know what? I want to provide people a form that give them the ability to enter or create risks directly from within inside of SharePoint, because they don't necessarily want to log into your PPM tool. Or it could be your ServiceNow tool or any other PPM tool that you want. Well, this will dynamically now go and read the business rules of that source system and allow you to enter the data in a common platform that you're familiar with. So what are we doing here? We are providing a common platform for people to enter data, right? So here I'm going to call this, and like I said, all of the rules, so all of the values come dynamically from that PPM tool, right? But really eliminates the need for end users to have complexities within inside of the different forms. Why? Because it doesn't matter what form or what product you're using. At the end of the day, you're going to be entering and editing your data from the same location. Okay? I'm going to come back in the same thing with timesheets, right? In this case, a particular user like myself could be assigned to a project inside of SharePoint or ServiceNow. Well, I can enter the time entry from both of those projects, and it feeds the data back into the end system. So like I said, what is the main goal that is trying to accomplish here is to make data entry easy, right? You know, so, you know, some key tips for solutions, right? Number one, leadership, right? So it starts from the top down, right? Half the battle is won when your company's leadership stresses the importance of company data and its integrity, right? So when leadership and management understands this importance, right, strategic company goals and budgets are typically met, right? Number two, governance, right? So we want to establish and put in place a clear set of rules and responsibilities to ensure accountability. Another one, number three, is systems, processes, and testing, right? So front-end and back-end systems, you know, I know a lot of organizations that actually run queries to figure out when things were last updated by or things were last created by to make sure that people are updating correct data, okay? Number four, I would say policies, okay? So you want to develop and implement best practice policies and procedures, you know, to consistently check data. Tip number five, most important, people. So skills and training, right? Having the correct people with the correct skills and training in the correct roles will significantly assist in effectively managing companies' data integrity. I am going to stop for a couple of minutes. I'm going to open the board for questions. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do while I wait for these questions to come in is I am going to cover the questions that people have already populated in here, right? As I mentioned before, most of the people are in the 70% for data accuracy. As far as manipulating data, you are not alone. Everybody is manipulating data in flight, right? As far as having more than one system, I would say that about 40% of you utilize more than one PPM system. The one thing I didn't ask is if they were all integrated together or not. I'm sure they are. But so, like I said, feel free to ask any questions you guys might have. All right, I got one here. What are your success experiences with the banking industry for these types of situations? So, oh boy, I would say that banks are probably our biggest clients. Obviously, they manage the most amount of data, so, and you know, they're probably the most scrutinized. We have worked with probably I'm not going to say the biggest banks in the world, but some of the largest banks in the world implementing these types of solutions. So our solutions are most common, or initially were most commonly purchased by, telecoms, companies that deal with large number of projects. So we have lots of experience in the banking industry. So I see another one that says, I dream of integration, but not yet. Well, maybe someday we can help you with that, with that particular integration. Anybody else? I don't see a lot of new questions coming in. So here it says, viewing others' perspective, are we including more complexity by introducing more integration into PPM? Rather follow the best practices into the same tool. Obviously, if your business can maintain one tool, whatever that one tool may be, and that tool captures all of the data that you require, then yes, absolutely one tool is the best solution. And as long as that tool is designed correctly, like I said, and easy to use, right? You want to make sure that data entry is easy. And I'm going to come back to cost plans. A lot of people come and say, well, cost plans aren't really a big deal because cost plans, we only update our cost plans once a year. Well, I always tell people, well, files. I think I just demoed that particular piece. In this particular case, I have SharePoint embedded in here, right? And let me just look for another file here. And literally, I can drag and drop my documents into SharePoint for collaboration and visualize them through your CAPPM tool. So absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's probably the most common request for people that integrate SharePoint and CAPPM is first documents, second displaying data from within inside of CAPPM to SharePoint, and number 3 is making it bidirectional. So how can we allow people to enter data directly into SharePoint and have it feed back to your system of source, right? So is there an Excel interface for cost plans similar to what you demonstrated for the team tab in CAPPM, especially for forecasting by project managers? Absolutely. And let me see if I can provide an example here. I think I have cost plan data in this project. I'm going to see if I do. Yeah, so in this particular case, right, I pulled out my cost plan data, right? This is my costing information, so I can come here and I can enter the new values for my cost plan, and you utilize the exact same copy, paste, drag, drop functionality, and load your data. Now, with inside of Excel, I'm going to come back and I'm going to get a little bit into, data validation issues as well. This Excel will also validate data to make sure that end users don't enter the incorrect values, right? I see another question here that says, what about from SharePoint into CAPPM? Well, in this particular case, I think we covered the risks and issues, right? So this is that particular risk that we just created. We called SharePoint. Remember, we created it from this form, right? If I come in here into my risk and issues, we can see that that particular risk is here. So yes, absolutely bidirectional. So anything that you put into SharePoint, you can automatically feed. Well, this particular interface, what it does is it utilizes SharePoint as a display engine. So anything that you do here is really getting the data and pushing it back into your source system. The next question I see is, how would you rate the SharePoint integration versus collaboration thing available in PPM, which is for the same purpose of document management? CAPPM, like all other PPM tools, they're not designed for document management. They're designed for project management. So document management is not their strength, right? Can't really do a lot of the functionality that you can do for document management that you can inside of SharePoint. So they're completely different animals. I mean, if you're already using SharePoint and you already have the benefits of utilizing SharePoint for your document management, then you would see the benefit in integrating the two, so you map the two together. So the next question is, can users with access to the SharePoint site update data files even if they are not CAPPM users? Absolutely, yes. And that's really one of the main purposes is, you might not necessarily want to give particular access to everybody in your organization to particular project data within inside of your PPM, but you might want to give it to them inside of SharePoint, right? So yes, you can absolutely do that directly from SharePoint. You said, all right, I got another one here. It says, you said Excel is not a good idea for data accuracy, but now you're showing Excel. Oh, good, someone's paying attention to what I'm saying. What is the difference between using your Excel interface and just dropping the data into a regular Excel sheet? All right, so as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, right, what we're utilizing in this case SharePoint for is a display engine. Well, that's the exact same case for this Excel, all right? In this particular Excel, we're not hand typing anything in. We get the data from your system of record. So let's say I get project data, all right? So I'm going to say I grab my project data from inside of PPM, okay? So I'm getting it from my system of record. I manipulate the data. So I want to change this particular manager. I'm going to say I'm going to replace this manager because he left. And I'm going to replace it with this guy, which is myself, right? So it says, okay, we replaced a bunch of managers. I'm going to actually create untype one here, right? I validate the data, right? So this automatically tells me if my data is valid or not. So I fix my data. You notice here I can't load the data until it's valid, right? So I revalidate. Right? It says all my data is good. Now I can load it. Okay? So what am I using? I'm utilizing Excel strictly as a display mechanism. All right? Why? Easy to use. People are familiar with Excel, right? And I just did a change that would have normally taken, I don't know, however number of minutes, more than a few seconds that it took to do in Excel, and I've taken it and made it very dramatic changes within inside of Excel very, very quickly, right? So this is the type of stuff that's very time-consuming and tedious to do inside of web applications. Okay, and that's why Excel for this particular scenario is so powerful. But we're not utilizing Excel to massage your data. We're using Excel to validate, update, and make your data more accurate. Right, making it easy to make it accurate. Well, we have 3 minutes left in the call. I'm going to say that I want to thank everybody for attending this call. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're going to send everyone that registered to this a replay to the video on Monday morning. And like I said, if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll gladly help you guys out. So I'm going to give you guys back those 2 minutes left in your day, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.